Welcome to Photography 101. Sorry I couldn't resist, and I'll only get this opportunity once now, won't I? Camera settings 1, things that you can set and forget. Hi and welcome to episode 101 of the Photography Explained podcast. Apologies for that. I'm your host Rick, and in each episode I will try to explain one photographic thing to you in plain English in less than 10 minutes-ish without the irrelevant details. What I tell you is based on my lifetime of photographic experience and not Google. Before I go on, I need your help. I need your questions to answer. This is why my podcast exists, so please get in touch with your question and you'll get a shout out from me in a future episode. Just head over to photographyexplainedpodcast.com/start. Okay, thank you, and I really look forward to hearing from you. No, I really do. Okay, so here is the answery bit. There are a whole range of camera settings that you set once you are done. Set once and you are done. No, that was alright, wasn't it? Let's start again. There are a whole range of camera settings that you set once and you are done. But you need your camera manual to find all these settings. The starting point is things that you set and forget, so your camera works for you and your photography, whatever that may be. Now, this is an individual thing that we should all do when we get a new camera. Or you should do right now if you've not done this already. Oh, okay. Do it after you've listened to this episode of my podcast, not before. Okay then, let's take a look at this. When I bought my Canon 6D, I read the manual and I found all sorts of things that I didn't know that the camera did. Some of them I didn't want the camera to do, and some I did. Now, I cannot tell you what camera settings you need to set and forget, as I don't know what camera you have, nor what you're taking photos of, or what your preferences are. It'd be rude and arrogant to assume that you want the same things that I want from my camera. But this is the point. You need to know about these things so you can set them how they work for you, okay? That's what I want you to take from this episode. That there is stuff that you need to find and set how you want to make the camera work the best for you. And in learning this, you should feel less overwhelmed by this seemingly never-ending camera settings thing. Now, my Canon 6D manual is 404 pages long. And yes, it took me a while to plough through it all, but I only did this once. I popped back to it a few times, but I had the one big explore. So, these are examples of the things that I set in my Canon 6D years ago and never changed. Auto power off. Well, the Canon 6D turns off after 1 minute. You can change this to whatever you want. I've never changed this. I'd actually forgotten about this. 1 minute works for me, so I don't need to worry about that again. Interface language. It's set to English. I've not touched this. Now, to be honest with you, I want to, just to see what things look like in a different language, but I'm worried that I'll not be able to get back to English if I do that. Image review time. You can turn this off, set a time, or have the image on screen on something called hold. I didn't know that. Now, I have this set to 2 seconds, which is fine for me. LCD monitor off or on? It's up to you. I leave mine on. Why would you turn it off? And before I go on, you can reset everything back to default settings if you make a mess of things. That was good, wasn't it? If you can make a mess of things. You can reset everything back to default settings if you make a mess of things, like I made a mess of that sentence. Well, you can with the Canon 6D anyway, and I'm assuming that most of the cameras you got the same ability. So, yeah. Now, I'm not going to go on, or I'll end up talking through the entire camera manual, which will be very dull for all of us. Imagine that, 404 pages of me talking about stuff in a camera manual. It's not good, is it? But I hope you get the point that there is stuff you set in camera that you probably do not need to come back to. And this makes those endless camera settings and that 400-page manual a lot less daunting, a lot more manageable, and even something that might be of use rather than something to be scared of. And I also hope you got the point that you need the right camera settings for you. More on that later. Now, there is one more thing I want to say here. There's something called custom settings on Canon cameras. I have no idea if other camera systems have them. These are custom settings on the Canon 6D, and they're not the easiest things to navigate, I have to say, but there is some interesting and good stuff in there. Now, there's one custom setting that I changed, and I've never gone back to the default setting of this setting. Too many settings in a sentence. Back button focus. I've changed how my camera works to suit me. Using a custom setting, I have assigned focusing to the AF on button on the back of my Canon 6D. All the shutter release is doing now is starting the self-timer, and it's also taking the exposure. Now, I don't want to overcomplicate things, but keep going with the camera manual and you'll find all sorts of good stuff, believe me. What do? Well, I've already told you that, haven't I? The talky bit. Well, there seem to be an endless number of camera settings, and it can appear daunting. I completely get that. And when I say set and forget, you can always go back and change things if you need to, but only if you need to. Now, if you want to spend your time changing things, then that's fine and entirely up to you. I do not recommend that you do this. What I do recommend is this, I recommend that you get the camera settings that are the best for you and use them. Go out and take photos and see if things work for you. And if they do not, fine, change things. But do this over time, keeping a note of what each change gives you. Don't change everything every time. You'll struggle to progress and you'll end up getting disillusioned. Trust me, I've been there. So do this gradually over time and you should end up in the place that I am, which, to be fair, was after 15 years. And this is the place I am at is where I have my settings so sorted that all I change on a commercial shoot is the following: the focus point, possibly the aperture, and possibly the focal length. Seriously, this is all that I change, leaving me to concentrate on the small matter of composition, what I include in a photo and what I do not include in a photo. And for me, this is what photography should be all about, the composition. Of course, photos need to be taken correctly, but this should be secondary to getting the best composition every time. How do I know which settings to choose, I hear some of you asking. Well, if you're new to this stuff, no problem. Certainly read the manual and see if your camera offers guidance. Now, on the Canon 6D, it's got something called a feature guide, where features descriptions are described on the LCD screen, which is pretty cool. And I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't know that. So when I went through the manual, I clearly missed a few bits off. And if you're really new to all this, start with the basic shooting modes. It's more important that you get out and take photos and use your camera. So if this is all confusing to you, just hit program and get out there and get some photos that you can look at. The beginning to mastering a camera is to go out and take photos, look at what you get and see what settings you can change to make the photos better. There is no shame in using program mode. We've all been there, and anyone who tells you that you have to use manual to be a proper photographer, well, send them my way and I will put them straight. Now, I can guarantee you that time spent learning how to use your camera, learning what all the settings are and what they do, this will pay for itself many times over. The first time you go through all this stuff will be hard work, but the second time will be less painful. And this is really, it's the only way to get the best out of your camera. And don't forget, if you've got any questions, just ask me. Now, I just want to recap this. You need to go through your manual and there's a load of settings. They're like global settings that are things that make the camera work. And you just need to go through them. Just go through them once and then go out and use the camera. Because in the next episode, we're going to be talking about the stuff that you change on each and every shoot. And then after that, I'm going to go on to the settings that you change before you take each photo. So this is one of those things, you don't do it every time. You do it once. And if something didn't work, or if there's something you want to do differently, get back to your manual and change that setting. And as you get used to using your camera more, you will find that how you want to use it changes. But if you haven't gone through that manual and started off with these global settings, you won't know what else is in there. The best example is the custom function settings in the Canon 6D. Those are pretty much at the end of the manual, quite well hidden, quite hard to get your head round, and not easy to apply. But you need to get a basic understanding of your camera before you can start to do some of this custom stuff. So, as with all things in photography, practice, 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 and you will get there. So you don't need to feel daunted if your camera manual, like mine, has 404 pages, because you don't have to use all 404 pages every time. Sometimes you just need to dip in and find one thing and dip out again. Okay, so related episodes. Well, to be honest, there's loads of episodes that relate to this. So just check out the Photography Explained podcast website. That's photographyexplainedpodcast.com, where you will find the full list of episodes. But if you missed episode 100, check it out here. Why are there so many camera settings? I am confused. Help me. Next episode, well, Photography Explained podcast episode 102. Things that you might change when out taking photos. Okay, following on now from the stuff that you're not going to change when you're out taking photos to the stuff that you might change when you're out taking photos. Shout out. Well, shout out to me and my course. Find out more at rickmcavoyphotography.com/courses. Well, if I can't promote myself here, where can I? And talking of my course, which I was, the course is called how to become a real estate photographer. That's great. I forgot the name of my own course that I've created myself. Oh dear. I really did create it myself, by the way. And I've asked for your questions, which will earn you a shout out in this section and will take my free ad for me out of the way. So if you don't want to hear me promoting my course, get a question in. Okay, I'm done. Thanks for listening to my small but perfectly formed podcast. To find out more about my podcast and do stuff to help me, check out photographyexplainedpodcast.com/start. Well, this episode was brought to you by Tea from Yorkshire, aka Yorkshire Tea. And no, I'm not being paid to say that. I buy mine from Tesco just like everybody else. Right then, I've been Rick McAvoy. Thanks again very much for listening to me and for giving me 10-ish minutes of your valuable time. And I will see you on the next episode. Cheers from me, Rick.